Imani Brooks was dragged out of her own resort pool, in handcuffs by cops called by a white guest who thought she didn't belong. Cameras rolled, guests gasped. But no one expected what happened next. Because when Imani pulled out her ID, everything exploded. What if the woman they humiliated owned the entire resort? Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The late summer sun kissed the polished stone tiles of the Solstice Grand Resort in Charleston, South Carolina. It was one of those southern afternoons where everything looked golden. The infinity pool shimmered like liquid glass, white towels were perfectly rolled atop teak loungers, and the scent of lemon oil drifted from a row of freshly waxed cabanas. Laughter echoed from children splashing in the shallows while adults sipped cocktails and shared travel plans. Every detail screamed luxury, every surface pristine, every smile curated. Among the scene of opulence, a black woman sat alone. She wore an emerald green swimsuit that looked more couture than casual, her long braids coiled atop her head like a crown. Her eyes were shielded by oversized tortoiseshell sunglasses, her skin radiant in the sun. She exuded calm, elegance, and something else beneath it all: ownership. Her name was Imani Brooks. Imani didn't speak much as she sat poolside. She simply observed. Guests passed by, and occasionally glanced. Curious, perhaps. Some smiled. A few looked twice. She barely acknowledged them. She sipped from a tall glass of cucumber water, and flipped a page in her book. And then came her. Cynthia Hargrove was the kind of woman who mistook proximity to wealth as a personality. With platinum blonde waves, designer sandals, and oversized diamond earrings, she looked like old money even though her fortune came from real estate flips and a third husband's insurance payout. Cynthia spotted Imani and immediately stiffened. She scanned the pool area, then zeroed in again on the woman in green. Imani didn't flinch when Cynthia approached. She barely looked up. "You lost, sweetheart." Cynthia's voice was syrupy, but sharp-edged, the kind that cut when it smiled. Imani turned a page. Cynthia stepped closer. "Excuse me, miss. I asked you something. You're not allowed here if you're not a guest. This is a private resort in case you didn't know." Imani looked at her, finally, a slow, disbelieving blink. "I'm aware." "Well then, show your keycard. We've had some issues recently. People sneaking in from the public beach." From her chair a few rows down, a young Latina couple looked over, eyebrows raised. An elderly black man in the hot tub turned his head. Imani said nothing. Cynthia, now emboldened, pulled out her phone. "Fine. If you won't identify yourself, I'll let hotel security deal with you. Maybe next time you'll think twice before trespassing." Imani gave her a dry glance and returned to her book, but her fingers tightened around the spine. 15 minutes later, 2 hotel security guards, both white men in navy polo shirts, arrived. Cynthia met them halfway, already performing. "There she is." She pointed. "Right by the third lounger. That one." Her voice had dropped, urgent but self-satisfied. "She refused to show ID. She's not a guest. I have my family here, and we paid for peace of mind." The guards hesitated. One of them, the younger of the two, looked unsure. The other nodded slowly. They approached Imani. "Ma'am, may we speak with you for a moment?" Imani calmly placed her bookmark between the pages and looked up. "Yes? We've received a report of a non-guest on the property. Would you mind showing your room key or ID?" "I would mind," Imani replied, "but I'll do it anyway, for the camera." She gestured toward a guest who had started filming on their phone. The guard blinked. "It's just routine, ma'am." "Routine for who?" she asked, not moving. Cynthia stood off to the side, arms folded, clearly enjoying herself. "She's being difficult," she muttered. "Just call the police already." The senior guard sighed and stepped back. "I'm sorry, ma'am. If we could just—" And then, sirens. 2 police cruisers pulled up outside the pool gates. A hush fell over the deck. Children stopped splashing. Conversations slowed. People turned in their seats. Everyone knew what was happening. It was happening again. The officers, both white, one stocky, one wiry, walked briskly toward the pool. Cynthia intercepted them. "There she is. That woman there. She's refusing to leave. Causing a scene. She might be armed." "Armed?" Imani repeated. "Now I'm armed?" "Ma'am, please don't escalate," the wiry officer said as they approached. "I'm not escalating," Imani replied coolly. But you are. Step away from the lounge chair, the other said. No, Imani said. There was tension now, real and visible. The crowd bristled. The camera phones came out again. More of them this time. Cynthia huffed. Can't you just remove her? This is insane. Ma'am, the younger officer said, we'll handle it. But Imani was already reaching into her beach tote. Slowly, the officer warned, hand moving toward his holster. Imani's fingers paused. Then she continued. Unhurried, deliberate. She pulled out a slim leather wallet, opened it, and held it up. Inside was a gold-embossed ID card with 2 lines of text. Imani Brooks, owner and CEO, Solstice Resorts International. The silence cracked. The older officer's face drained. The younger stepped back, instinctively. Cynthia's jaw fell open. You, Cynthia blinked. You own this place? Imani didn't answer her. She addressed the officers.
Would you like a tour?
They said nothing. She turned to Cynthia. Still want to see my room key? Cynthia's mouth opened. Closed. No sound came out. Around the pool, murmurs rose. A young white man whispered, Damn. An older black woman near the bar smiled like she'd just won something. Imani stood. She adjusted her sarong, placed her ID back in the tote, and gathered her things. The officer stammered apologies. The guards tried to explain. Cynthia stood frozen, visibly shrinking. But Imani didn't acknowledge any of them. She simply walked away, back toward the main building, her building, leaving behind silence, cameras and shame. At the door, a hotel assistant met her, whispering nervously.
Ms. Brooks, there's something else. It's about your housekeeper. Something's come up.
Imani stopped. Housekeeper? The assistant nodded. There's a video, and it's spreading fast. Imani turns her phone over. The screen loads slowly, and then she sees it. Her black maid, Lena, cradling her infant son and breastfeeding him. For a long moment, there was only silence. Thick, charged, and undeniable. The air around the pool had shifted entirely. The lazy tranquility of an elite afternoon now buzzed with tension and disbelief. The sun still shone brightly, but a dark cloud had passed through the hearts of everyone who witnessed the scene unfold. Guests, frozen with wide eyes and open mouths, turned slowly toward Cynthia. It was as if they'd seen something sacred desecrated, not by Imani's presence, but by Cynthia's audacity. Her assumptions, her pride. The police officers stepped back, their postures uncertain now, stripped of the confident authority they arrived with. One officer cleared his throat, stammering a line that sounded like an apology but wasn't. Ma'am, we were just following up. It's standard to respond when a guest calls. Imani didn't blink. Her gaze remained locked on Cynthia, not with fire but with something colder. Disappointment, so sharp and quiet it became louder than any outrage ever could. I didn't know, Cynthia said suddenly, voice cracking under the weight of her mistake. You didn't look like, I didn't realize you. Imani lifted one brow, just barely. That was all it took to stop Cynthia mid-sentence. And then, Imani said nothing. Not a single word. Across the deck, a group of black teens stood with towels over their shoulders, eyes wide. One of them whispered, That's her. That's the owner. Another pulled out their phone, already live streaming. The moment was viral within minutes. Imani walked, gracefully, deliberately. Her heels clicked across the stone. Her chin was high, her tote bag resting on her shoulder, her silence commanding more respect than any monologue could. She passed guests who parted like water. She walked past the spa, the concierge desk, and into the glass doors of her own empire. The moment the doors closed behind her, she inhaled deeply. Inside the executive wing, Imani moved quickly through the marble hallway. Her assistant, Renee, caught up with her breathlessly. Imani, I am so sorry. Security never should have. Imani held up a hand. Don't apologize for other people's ignorance. Just send the footage to PR and legal. They already have it, Renee replied, trying to keep pace. But there's something else, something urgent. Imani stopped mid-step. Renee hesitated, voice low. It's Lena, the housekeeper. There's a video going around. But before she could say more, Imani's mind flashed back to a different pool. She was 6. Her father, Calvin Brooks, wore his best shirt, neatly pressed with sleeves rolled to his elbows. He held her hand as they walked through the lobby of a hotel just like this one, only older, less polished, and much less welcoming. He wanted to show her the world, he'd said. A man from a modest background with big dreams and a bigger heart. They'd made it to the edge of the pool when a white manager stormed over. No loitering, he snapped. This is private property. Imani remembered the confusion on her father's face, and the humiliation when 2 security guards escorted them out. Even though Calvin had made a reservation, he didn't fight, he didn't yell, he just held her hand tighter as they walked away. It was the first time she saw his pride shatter. That memory never left her. She'd built her first resort in his honor. And today she'd been accused of trespassing in a place built from that memory. Imani refocused. Her voice was like steel silk. What kind of video, Renee? Renee hesitated. It's strange. It shows Lena in your home, with Zayden. She's holding him, feeding him. So? Imani said sharply. She's breastfeeding him. Imani froze. The words didn't register. Then they hit like glass.
What?
Renee pulled out her phone and turned the screen toward her. It's already online. The video played shaky, low-quality footage from what looked like a baby monitor angle. Lena, sitting on the edge of the rocking chair in the nursery, gently holding Imani's infant son, Zayden. The baby latched onto her, calm and content. Lena hummed a soft lullaby, swaying ever so slightly. It was intimate, maternal, and undeniably not normal. The caption read, "Maid caught pretending to be baby's mother while homeowner away." The comments were worse. "This is dangerous. Why is she acting like it's her child? Rich people are crazy for letting help in their homes. Where's the real mom? She should be fired and arrested." Imani's heart dropped, not just because of what she saw, but because she knew Lena, knew her calm, nurturing presence, knew how Zayden calmed down only when Lena was near, how he slept better when she was on shift, how even Imani herself had leaned on the woman more than she ever admitted.
Now this?
"I need to talk to her," Imani said, voice tight. "She's not here," Renee replied nervously. "She went home 2 hours ago. I called, but she's not picking up." Imani's stomach twisted. This wasn't just about the video. It was about what it meant. Was this delusion? Was there something Lena had hidden all this time? And if not, who filmed it? Who leaked it? Who was trying to break her? As the evening fell over Charleston, storm clouds gathered along the coast. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the palm leaves along the veranda. Imani stood at the tall glass windows of her penthouse suite, staring at her reflection. The CEO, the mother, the black woman who just fought off one racial humiliation only to face another that cut even deeper. The media buzzed. The PR team scrambled. Her attorney texted twice. "We need a full investigation. Lena may be unstable." But Imani didn't respond. Her mind was already unraveling too many threads. Why would Lena do this? Why had Zayden not resisted? Why had the moment, as inappropriate as it was, looked so natural? Then her phone rang.
"No caller ID."
She answered. A deep, low voice spoke urgently. "Ms. Brooks, you need to come to the estate. Now." She recognized the voice. Gerald, the night security manager. "There's another issue," he said, breath tight. "It's about your maid. You need to see this for yourself." Imani grabs her keys, heart pounding. But as she rushes down the hallway toward the elevator, her phone buzzes again. A news alert flashes across the screen, made from viral video missing. Police investigating possible abduction. Lena James moved through the sunlit nursery with a grace that made her presence nearly invisible, her hands steady as she adjusted the soft blanket, wrapped around baby Zayden, whose breath rose and fell in small rhythmic puffs. The early morning light filtered through sheer curtains, casting golden lines across the hardwood floors of Imani Brooks's private estate, just behind the resort. It was quiet here, deceptively peaceful. This part of the resort wasn't for guests. It was home, and Lena treated it with more care than she ever gave her own. In her 40s, Lena carried the weight of years in her back and the tenderness of 1,000 unspoken wounds in her eyes. She'd worked for the Brooks family for less than a year, but the bond she had with Zayden was undeniable, something that even Imani had noted early on. Yet on this particular morning, a silent red light blinked from a corner of the nursery, a newly installed nanny cam, one Imani had authorized weeks ago not out of distrust, but out of habit. Another layer of control in a world where everything had to be watched. That camera caught Lena in a moment of pure complex humanity. Zayden had been crying uncontrollably, and after trying bottles, songs, rocking, and humming, Lena, trembling, made a choice. She sat down, pulled the infant to her chest, and gently began to nurse him. It lasted only a few moments, long enough for him to settle, his cries turning into small hiccups, his fingers curling softly around the edge of her shirt. The camera captured it all, the angle slightly off-center, the lighting dim, but the act, unmistakable. By mid-afternoon, the footage had leaked online, posted anonymously under the caption, "Maid pretends to be baby's mother in billionaire's home." It exploded within hours. News outlets picked it up. Hashtags spun furiously. "Nanny gone too far. Who is the mother?" Some viewers were enraged, calling for Lena's arrest, accusing her of boundary violations, mental instability, even child endangerment. Others, more nuanced, questioned the context. "She looked like she was comforting the child," one user commented. "Maybe there's more to this." But context was a luxury social media rarely afforded. At the estate, Amani watched the video on loop in disbelief, her throat dry and heart pounding with each repetition of Lena's face. The way she looked at Zayden, not with servitude, but something deeper, something that made Amani's stomach turn with questions she didn't know how to ask. Lena didn't come in that day. Her phone went straight to voicemail. The security team said she hadn't returned home. Amani sat in her study, staring at a photo on her desk, her and Zayden at the beach, his small face pressed against her shoulder. She'd never questioned where he came from. Born at Charleston West Medical, just like hundreds of other infants that year, healthy, tiny, and perfect. But now, for the first time, something felt fractured. That evening, Lena walked into the estate through the back door, quiet, hands folded, face drawn. Amani was already waiting, sitting in the den, like a judge behind invisible glass. "Close the door," Amani said, her voice sharper than she intended. Lena obeyed, then stood in the center of the room like a child awaiting punishment. "Tell me you didn't do what that video shows," Amani said. Lena's lips quivered, but she didn't lie. "I did." Amani stood up, her breath caught between anger and confusion. "You breastfed my son, Lena. You put your body on him like you were." "I wasn't pretending," Lena whispered. "I wasn't thinking." He wouldn't stop crying. He looked hungry. And then something just happened. "That's not an explanation," Amani snapped. "That's an instinct, not a justification. You crossed a line that can't be uncrossed." Lena began to cry then, not loud sobs, but silent streams down her cheeks, like something that had been waiting too long to be released. "I know," she said, "but I need you to know why I did it, why it didn't feel wrong." Amani's eyes narrowed. "Then tell me." Lena took a long, trembling breath. "I gave birth 2 years ago, at Charleston West, same hospital, same floor, same week Zayden was born." Amani's heart slowed. "What?" "I had a son," Lena said, her voice breaking. "He was premature. They told me he died during the night, but I never saw the body. No one let me hold him. They said he went into distress and passed before I was awake." "Lena, but after I started working here," Lena continued, "the first time I held Zayden, I felt something, not just maternal, deeper. His smell, his skin. I thought I was going crazy. I brushed it off, but every time I was near him it came back, like my body knew him." Amani sat down, shaking. "Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting?" "I'm not sure," Lena said, softly, "but I can't shake the feeling. And when I saw that video, the one going viral, I realized I couldn't hide it anymore." "You think Zayden is your child?" Amani whispered. "Biologically, yes," Lena said, "and if I'm right, that means there was a switch. At the hospital. Maybe intentional, maybe not. But something happened." Amani stood again, her vision swimming. "Do you realize what you're saying? That I've raised a child who was never mine?" "No," Lena said fiercely, stepping forward. "You are his mother. You raised him. You love him. I'm not trying to take that from you." "Then what do you want?" Amani asked. "The truth," Lena said, tears streaking her face. "I need to know what they did to my baby, and if I lost my son, or if you've been raising him all along." The silence that followed was deafening. Somewhere in the house, Zayden stirred in his crib, letting out a soft cry that neither woman moved to comfort. They just stared at each other, two black women bound by a baby, a tragedy and a history bigger than both of them. Outside, thunder rumbled, the sky cracked open above the resort. But inside, something far more fragile was breaking. Then Amani's phone buzzed again. Another notification, this one, from an anonymous number. Just a photo of Zayden's birth certificate, and a second one, with another name. A name Amani had never seen before. The hospital logo stamped across both, and beneath it, a handwritten signature that didn't match her. Imani clutches the phone as the realization dawns. Someone forged her signature at the hospital. Someone wanted this switch to happen. Imani's breath caught in her chest as her eyes scanned the second birth certificate, her fingers trembling over the forged signature. Her name, written in a slanted, unfamiliar hand beneath hospital seals, an ink that had long dried, but never lost its venom. Everything in her body rejected the truth, trying to settle in her mind. Yet the documents stared back at her like mirrors from a past she never knew she was part of. She looked up at Lena, who had already placed a small manila folder on the coffee table, slowly nudging it forward as though it carried something sacred or lethal. Inside were medical records, labor logs, and discharge summaries from the same week Zayden had been born, revealing that Lena's son had been admitted to the neonatal ICU in critical condition, but with no death certificate, not a single one. Instead, there was a handwritten note, in a nurse's chart that read, "Mother unconscious, child taken to ICU, next of kin not located." The note, dated the same day Imani had been told her own son was in perfect health, sent a cold ripple through her blood. "You never got to hold your son?" Imani asked, her voice barely registering. "No," Lena whispered, her eyes hollow. "They said he was gone before I woke up." Imani's heart twisted painfully. "But if your baby didn't die," Lena finished the sentence for her, "then maybe he became yours." The weight of those words dropped into the room like a stone into still water, sending waves of doubt and sorrow in every direction. For the next hour, Imani pored over every document Lena had managed to retrieve through back channels: patient ID tags, wristband numbers, blood type mismatches, nurse shift schedules. But what shook her most was how precise the timeline was. Lena had been admitted just hours before Imani, placed in a different wing, and treated by a nurse named Darlene Wexler, a name Imani hadn't heard in years, but now sent chills down her spine. Darlene Wexler had been the head nurse on duty during Zayden's birth, and the same woman Imani had once filed a verbal complaint against. After being ignored during early labor, Darlene had brushed her off, saying she was exaggerating her pain, and young mothers always panic. That complaint had disappeared into thin air, never followed up, never documented. Digging deeper, Imani discovered through legal contacts that Wexler had been quietly fired a year later after multiple internal investigations related to patient mistreatment, almost exclusively against women of color. The pattern was chilling. Meanwhile, far from Charleston, a different storm was brewing. Brent Holloway, Imani's ex-husband and Zayden's biological father, sat in his Manhattan penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows and no trace of the family he once tried to control. The viral footage of Lena breastfeeding Zayden had reached him within hours, sent by his assistant, flagged as urgent. Brent watched the clip in silence, jaw clenched, eyes narrowing, not because of outrage, but recognition. "I know her," he muttered to himself, voiced. The screen froze on Lena's face, a face from his past, years earlier, before the scandal, before the divorce. Brent had owned a private mountain resort in Vermont. Lena had worked there briefly, one winter, quiet, diligent, invisible to most, but not to Brent. One snowy night during a staff holiday party, drinks flowing and boundaries blurring, he'd taken advantage of his power, charm, and Lena's exhaustion. What followed was a brief, regrettable entanglement, one that ended in whispers and silence. Lena had disappeared weeks later, no resignation, no explanation. Brent never thought of her again, until now. Now he saw not just a maid in the video, but a woman he had once wronged, now holding the child that might be his. His eyes flicked back to the paused video, Zayden's face pressed against Lena's chest, the softness of his cheek, the curve of his brow. There was no denying it. There was a likeness, a whisper of Brent's own baby photos hiding in the child's features, panic mixed with denial in his chest. Had Lena been pregnant when she left? Had she kept it secret? Had someone at the hospital known? And he stopped, a sharp, painful awareness cutting through his ego. If Lena's child and Imani's child were one and the same, and he was the biological father of both, then something more sinister had unfolded. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. Imani's number. It rang twice. She didn't pick up. He hung up, swore under his breath, then tried again. This time her voice answered, sharp, controlled. "What?" Brent hesitated. "We need to talk." "About what?" she snapped. "The maid, the baby, the media circus I'm cleaning up because your son is all over the internet with another woman's breast in his mouth." "Yes," Brent said, voice lower. "About all of that, and something else." "What?" she asked again, angrier now. Brent swallowed. "About Lena, and the fact that I knew her. A long time ago, before you and I were even married." Silence, long, dense, and dangerous. "You what?" Imani said slowly. "You knew her. She worked for me, briefly. Years ago. I didn't put it together until I saw the video. But I need you to understand something. I think this goes deeper than either of us thought. Imani's hand gripped the edge of the kitchen island. Brent, if you're about to tell me that you're the reason she's in this mess, I think Zayden might not just be your son. Or hers. Brent cut in. I think he might be ours. Time stopped. Imani's mind split. You're saying, I need to see you, Brent said. Now, her heart thundered in her chest. There were already too many cracks, too many unknowns. And now this man, her ex-husband, the man who once tried to sue for full custody and lost, was threading himself back into the middle of it all, laced into a story that had taken root long before she ever met Lena. Meet me tomorrow, Brent said. Charleston, I'll fly in. Why? She asked, breath catching. Because, Brent replied, voice unreadable. This baby switch. It wasn't an accident, and I think I know who was behind it. As the call ends, a private investigator emails Imani hospital records Brent, requested years ago, records that never appeared in her custody trial, records sealed with a court order. Her name isn't the only one missing from Zayden's file. Lena's is too. Brent Holloway arrived in Charleston under a storm of flashing cameras, long-lens paparazzi stationed near the airport gates, reporters shouting questions about the viral video and the scandal involving a billionaire's ex-wife, her maid, and a baby possibly caught in the middle of the ugliest kind of betrayal. An institutional one. Brent didn't flinch. He adjusted his dark sunglasses, walked past the noise with the arrogance of someone who still believed the world owed him respect despite every reason not to, and climbed into the black SUV waiting for him, never once looking back. At the estate, Imani was waiting. Not in her power heels or boardroom calm, but in an oversized cashmere sweater and loose curls, her eyes sleepless, body tense. She didn't offer him water or a seat, or a smile. Say what you came to say, she told him, arms folded. Brent, ever composed, set down his briefcase and opened it without a word. Inside was a slim contract folder, and next to it, a cashier's check for $5 million. What is this? Imani asked, not moving. It's an offer, Brent said. You walk away from Lena, drop the legal digging, silence the press, and in exchange I help fund your next resort expansion. No questions asked. I'll even sign over shared ownership of the Aspen property. Clean, simple. Imani stared at him, her disbelief so thick it could cut glass. You think you can buy silence? I'm trying to contain damage, Brent replied. To the child, to you, to everyone. This, whatever it is, it's already out of control. If we drag this through court, if it turns out Lena is the biological mother, the press will eat you alive. And let's be honest, Imani, the court system doesn't exactly favor women like you when things get messy. She took a step closer. Women like me don't, he said quickly. You know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean, she snapped. Black, successful, outspoken, and now under a microscope, because a white man you helped start something you couldn't finish. And now you're scared. I'm strategic, Brent said calmly. You, on the other hand, are walking into a fire you can't control. Good, Imani replied. Let it burn. Brent clenched his jaw, finally rattled. What do you even want, Imani? The truth, she said. And if that truth says Zayden isn't mine biologically, I'll deal with it. But I will not let this child's life be decided by the same people who've erased black women from history one signature at a time. The contract folder sat between them like a weapon. Imani didn't touch it. Brent packed it back in silence and walked out without another word. That night Imani met with her legal team, led by Savannah Keys, a fierce civil rights attorney with a history of fighting hospital negligence and racial malpractice. Savannah reviewed the documents, the forged signatures, the overlapping timelines, and shook her head. We'll need a court order for a DNA test, she said. Hospital won't cooperate otherwise. And even then, you have to prepare for what happens if the test says Lena is Zayden's biological mother. Will I lose him? Imani asked, voice low. Legally, not necessarily, Savannah said. Emotionally, that's another story. But Brent's involvement complicates things. If the court thinks you concealed the truth intentionally or not, you could face a custody reversal, especially if the biological mother steps forward with Brent backing her. Imani's hands curled into fists. So I either hide from the truth or risk losing my son. Savannah nodded, her voice softening. That's what these systems do. They punish your dignity, then dare you to protect it without bleeding. The words pierced something deep. That night, as the legal process for the court order was set in motion, Imani sat alone in the nursery, watching Zayden sleep, his cheeks flushed with dreams, his little hand resting against the fabric of the elephant-shaped pillow she'd picked out when she thought motherhood would be clean and joyful. But nothing had been clean, and joy came at a cost. Her mind flashed to her own mother, Dahlia Brooks, a nurse who raised Imani in a world that was anything but forgiving. She remembered being 10 years old, sitting outside a courtroom in Georgia, watching her mother cry into her palms after losing custody of Imani's baby brother to a white foster family, because the judge didn't see stability in her household. She had 3 jobs, no husband, and dark skin. The ruling had felt like a theft. The message had been loud: motherhood could be revoked if the system deemed you unfit, not by action, but by skin, income, or circumstance. Imani had vowed never to beg, never to sit outside a courtroom like that. But now, even with wealth and power, she could feel the edges of that same judgment crawling up her spine. The media didn't help. By the next morning, headlines painted a venomous picture: billionaire's wife turns on nanny, race and rage in Charleston baby drama, and worst of a viral segment from a conservative news outlet where a panel of white anchors debated whether Imani was overreacting and whether Lena was just a loving employee caught in a difficult situation. The phrase "angry black woman" wasn't said, but it was implied, wrapped in every word they chose to leave out. Imani didn't watch the segment past the first 2 minutes. She didn't need to. She'd lived it before, but this time it was her son they were turning into a spectacle. And Lena, the woman who might have birthed him, was being rebranded online as a natural mother figure, a phrase that erased Imani's sacrifices in a single stroke. Still, she stayed the course. She filed for the DNA test. Brent didn't fight it, probably because a part of him needed to know the truth too. The sample was taken under court supervision, with Zayden giggling as swabs brushed his cheeks, unaware that science was about to rearrange the world around him. The waiting began. Days passed. Then the call came. The lab technician's voice trembled on the phone. "Ms. Brooks, we have the results. I think you need to come in to receive them in person." "Why?" she asked. "Is something wrong?" "The match results are unusual," he said, "and we need to verify something before we can release the full findings." "Verify what?" Imani demanded. "We'll explain when you arrive, but please come today, and bring your attorney." As Imani hangs up, Savannah texts her simultaneously. "Just got a call from the court clerk. Another woman has filed a petition claiming she gave birth at the same hospital, same week, same room, and her baby was stolen too." The silence inside the sterile white room of the Charleston Private Diagnostics Lab was so thick it nearly suffocated the breath from Imani's lungs, as the technician laid the envelope on the table between them like it contained the future, not paper. Imani sat between Savannah, her attorney, and Lena, whose hands trembled visibly, resting on her lap like something fragile had taken residence there. Brent leaned against the wall, arms crossed, his eyes not on the folder, but on Zayden, who was asleep in his stroller beside the table, blissfully unaware that the entire architecture of his identity was hanging on the contents of an envelope nobody wanted to open. The technician cleared his throat, pushed his glasses up his nose, and said with careful precision, "We ran 3 independent tests, twice each, using mother-child paternal lineage matches." He looked at Lena, then at Brent, then at Imani. "We've confirmed paternity. Miss Holloway is the biological father of the child." "That's conclusive." Brent showed no expression. His jaw twitched slightly, but he said nothing. Imani stared ahead, unmoving, as if her ears had suddenly stopped translating sound into meaning. The technician then turned to Lena. "As for maternal results, there is a partial match between Miss James and the child. Not full, but significant. Our analysis shows that Miss James is the biological mother of a fraternal twin, which means," he paused, looked down at his paper, his voice cracking, "that at birth, there were 2 infants. Miss James gave birth to twins. One did not survive. The surviving child, Zayden, was documented incorrectly, and his birth records were swapped with another patient. That patient was listed under Imani Holloway, formerly Imani Brooks." Lena gasped, her whole body shuddering. Her breath came out in broken sobs before she even realized she was crying. Savannah put a hand on her shoulder, but Lena didn't notice. "So I'm not crazy," Lena whispered. "All this time I thought." "You're not crazy," the technician said gently. "Your son is alive, and he's been here with Miss Brooks for the last 2 years." Imani sat motionless. The words didn't hurt because they were cruel. They hurt because they were fine. She wasn't Zayden's biological mother. She never had been. She had held him, fed him, rocked him to sleep for 2 years. But her blood, her DNA, her genetic truth had no place in his body. A truth the world used to decide who mattered and who didn't. How does something like this even happen? Savannah asked, her voice sharp with disbelief. The technician's tone shifted. We pulled the archived records and found notes added by a now deceased nurse. Her name was Darlene Wexler. You may be familiar. She was the head nurse at the time. She documented concern over confusing patient assignments and wrote that she corrected assumed mislabeling between two black patients. The assumption, apparently, was that Miss James, being a single woman of color, could not afford twins, and that the other mother, Miss Holloway, was clearly the wealthier, better option. Imani's mouth fell open. Savannah whispered, so she assumed that the darker-skinned woman must have been the maid. We believe that assumption led to the falsification of charts, the technicians, and since the babies were of similar birth weight and condition, the mistake or deliberate decision went unnoticed. Brent let out a low curse under his breath. That woman made a call like she was God. She's dead now, Lena said hollowly. She gets to escape the fallout. Imani finally spoke, her voice fragile but clear. So what now? The technician looked to Savannah. Legally, the court will decide. But scientifically, there is no doubt. Miss James is the biological mother. Mr. Holloway is the father. Miss Brooks, your name was added to the documents after the fact, likely signed under misinformation. Imani stood slowly, walked toward the window and looked out at the parking lot. Sunlight reflected off windshields. People walked unaware. The world kept moving. But for her, everything had stopped. He calls me Mama, she whispered. He doesn't know anything else. You are his mother, Savannah said quietly. That's not something a blood test can erase. But the truth hovered, brutal and unrelenting. Lena stepped forward, voice trembling. I never wanted to take him from you. I only wanted answers. Answers have consequences. Imani replied, her back still turned. Sometimes they rewrite everything. Brent moved toward the table and picked up the paperwork with unsettling calm. So now we have what we need. What are you talking about? Savannah asked, suddenly alert. Brent held up the documents. These establish paternity and a biological connection to Lena. I can file for custody as the father. You're not even married to the mother, Savannah snapped. And you lost custody before. That was before we knew she wasn't the biological mother. Brent shot back. And legally that changes everything. Imani turned around slowly. You wouldn't. It's not about you, Imani, he said. It's about protecting my son from chaos. You're the source of the chaos, she shouted, finally letting the anger rise. You exploited Lena. You tried to buy silence. And now you want to take Zayden like he's a stock option, like he's leverage. Brent stepped closer. You're no longer the legal mother. You have no biological claim. And the court will want to know why you sat on a forged birth certificate for 2 years, without questioning it. I believed I was his mother, she cried. I had no reason not to. And the court won't care, Brent said coldly. You've given them a narrative. Powerful woman silences. Poor maid, hides the truth, claims the child as her own. It doesn't matter if it's not true. It sounds true. And that's what courts believe. Lena looked from one to the other, panic rising in her chest. No, you can't. He can, Savannah interrupted, her voice tight. Brent's filing for emergency full custody. He's going to weaponize the DNA test. Brent placed the documents into a folder, buttoned his coat and turned to leave. See you in court. The door shut behind him. Lena collapsed into the chair, hands covering her face. Imani didn't move. She looked at Zayden in the stroller, still sleeping, innocent, unknowing. The child she had sung to, fed, protected, whose first steps had been toward her, now legally a stranger. A knock came at the door. A courier stepped in, holding a manila envelope. For Miss Brooks, he said. Imani took it, opened it slowly. Inside a copy of Brent's emergency petition for full custody, and a letter from the court assigning a preliminary hearing for the next morning. At the bottom of the letter, a handwritten post-it note was attached. It read, Miss Brooks, you might want to ask why Brent requested sealed hospital records before Zayden was even born. The courthouse steps looked like a battlefield. Before the first gavel even dropped, news vans lined up like tanks, microphones extended like weapons, and a sea of people chanting, shouting, crying. Some held handmade signs reading, She raised him. She's his mother. While others bore images of Zayden's face, torn between two words, truth and blood. The internet had turned the custody trial into a cultural referendum, dissecting every layer, race, wealth, gender, trauma, until nothing felt sacred anymore. On national news, legal pundits debated the case, as if Imani Brooks were a headline, not a human being. One anchor asked, can someone who isn't biologically a mother still claim maternal rights? Live another countered. Would this be a case if she were Black motherhood matters trended globally, fueled by rage, empathy and exhaustion. Inside the courtroom, the air was electric and suffocating all at once. Reporters lined the back row, pens poised like daggers. The judge, Walter Henley, an aging white man, known across South Carolina for disproportionately stripping black families of parental rights in the name of best interest, presided from the bench, like a king, unimpressed by his court. His face was unreadable, lips tight, fingers steepled. Imani sat beside her attorney, Savannah, dressed in a dark navy suit that made her look both untouchable and fragile, her jaw clenched, eyes burning with the weight of both fury and fear. Lena sat across the aisle, her hands folded in her lap, face pale but composed. Brent, ever the strategist, sat with his attorneys, 3 of them, all white, all male, all with briefcases thicker than empathy. Mr. Holloway, your team may proceed, Judge Henley said. His voice flat. Brent's lead attorney rose, cleared his throat and began. Your Honor, we are here to restore rightful custody to a biological father, whose son has been wrongfully raised, under a false identity by a woman, who whether intentionally or not, obscured the truth. This is not an attack on Brooks's character, but a correction of a systemic failure. Mr. Holloway seeks only what any father would to protect his child. Savannah stood, calm and piercing. Objection to framing. The language suggests criminality where there is My client did not steal this child. She was given him by a hospital, whose racist negligence is the real culprit here. Sustained, Henley muttered, eyes already glazing. The trial unfolded like a slow, bruising dance. Brent's team painted Lena as unstable, emotionally compromised by grief, haunted by trauma, and too unpredictable to parent a child. They produced grainy photos of her walking alone at night, screenshots of emotional Facebook posts, written years ago after her stillbirth, posts that read like pleas but were now reframed as evidence of instability. Imani's defense was steady. Savannah brought in pediatricians, who testified to Zayden's thriving development, therapists who confirmed the secure maternal bond between him and Imani, and even a neighbor who shared how Zayden ran to Imani each day with open arms, calling her mama without hesitation. But the prosecution fired back with the DNA, with Brent's financial stability, with Lena's biological link. This child has roots, one attorney argued. He deserves to know where he truly came from. But at what cost? Imani's testimony brought the courtroom to stillness. He is my son, she said, her voice breaking only once. I may not have his blood, but I have his first words, his sleepless nights, his belly laughs. I have the memory of his first fever, the scar on his knee from when he fell in the driveway, the songs he likes before bedtime. If motherhood is just biology, then tell every adoptive parent they're frauds. But if motherhood is sacrifice, protection, love, then don't erase mine. A hush fell. Even Judge Henley paused, eyes narrowing slightly. But it wasn't over, not even close. The final blow came when Lena was called to the stand. The courtroom shifted in tone, no longer about legalities, but raw humanity. Lena took her seat, hands trembling. She glanced at Imani, then at Brent, then at the judge. James, the prosecutor began, you are the biological mother of Zayden. Do you wish to reclaim custody? Lena's throat moved as she swallowed, and for a moment it looked like she would break. I want what's best for him, she said softly. Which means I have to be honest, she said, eyes misting. I was angry when I found out the truth, angry at the hospital, angry at the system, but never at Imani. She's been a better mother than I could have imagined for my child. Savannah stood. Then do you support Brooks retaining custody? That's not a simple yes or no, Lena said, because I also see a man in this courtroom who's trying to weaponize this moment. Brent Holloway wasn't in Zayden's life before. He didn't want custody until now, so no, I don't trust him either. Brent shifted uncomfortably. Miss James, Judge Henley said slowly, who do you believe should raise this child? The courtroom held its breath. Lena looked directly at the judge, her voice steady. I know who Zayden should be with, and it's neither of them. Gasps echoed. Whispers exploded across the courtroom. Savannah stood, abruptly. Objection. What does that mean? Overruled, Judge Henley said. Curiosity piqued. Continue, Miss James. Lena took a deep breath. Before I left the hospital that night, a woman came into my room. She wasn't in scrubs. She wore a black dress, said she was a patient advocate from the state. She told me there had been a mistake, that the child I lost had been relocated. When I pressed her, she threatened to call child services. I was sedated. I didn't understand, and then she vanished. Savannah stepped forward, visibly shaken. Are you saying there was a coordinated removal of your child? Yes, Lena said. And I don't think Brent just found out about the switch this year. I think he's known, maybe not all the details, but enough. All heads turned to Brent, who stood up quickly. That's absurd, is it? Savannah challenged. You filed to seal hospital records before Zayden was born. You fought for full custody without evidence of paternity. And you made a financial offer to silence me. Brooks. The moment the story broke, Judge Henley tapped his gavel. Order. This court will not entertain conspiracy theories. It's not a theory, Savannah said. It's a pattern. But the judge was already scribbling notes. We'll reconvene for final arguments tomorrow morning. The gavel struck. Everyone stood. Reporters rushed out to file updates. Outside chants swelled. Lena sat down, tears sliding silently. Imani walked out without speaking. Brent followed, shouting something she didn't hear. Zayden remained at the center of it all. Innocent, beloved, and pulled in directions no child should ever endure. As Lena leaves through a side exit, a woman in a black dress watches her from across the street, then turns and disappears into a waiting car. The courtroom descended into a haze of murmurs and confusion after Lena's bombshell testimony, her words ricocheting off the marble walls and unsettling every soul in the room, not just because she refused to hand Zayden to either Imani or Brent, but because she'd named a woman no one else could see, a woman in a black dress who didn't belong in medical records or legal proceedings, but whose memory haunted her like a phantom. Judge Henley had recessed abruptly, visibly shaken by the shift in narrative, and reporters scrambled outside, piecing together half-truths and headlines as cameras rolled in every direction. Imani sat in the hallway just outside the courtroom, Zayden sleeping on her shoulder, his breath calm against the wreckage of her spirit. She didn't look at Brent when he passed her shoulders stiff, suit jacket hanging unevenly, eyes red around the edges but still unwilling to admit the collapse building inside him. But cracks were forming. Not in public, not yet, but deep inside the man who had spent his life measuring success in conquest, in control, in currency. In the privacy of his hotel suite that night, Brent stood before a mirror staring at the reflection of a man he no longer recognized. The TV played footage of the trial on mute behind him, pundits analyzing Lena's claims, hashtags flashing across the screen, image after image of Zayden being paraded like a symbol rather than a child. Brent's hands trembled as he poured whiskey into a crystal tumbler, barely tasting the burn that followed. For years he had fought for control, not love. Even his pursuit of custody had been about narrative, optics, power. But when Lena looked at the judge and said Zayden deserves more than money, power, or revenge, something inside Brent ruptured quietly. He had once believed that legacy was all that mattered, something inherited from his father, Harold Holloway, a Southern magnate whose fortune had been built not just on property but on pedigree, precision and pride. Brent remembered, with painful clarity, how his father had reacted when he brought Imani home the first time, not with open racism, but with thinly veiled superiority. She's poised, Harold had said, but we don't mix blood and business. That had been the foundation of Brent's life. Everything controlled, curated and cold. Love was never the point. Obedience was. Legacy was. And Zayden, Brent realized now, had been his attempt to reclaim power his father had stolen from him, to build a family in his image without understanding what that image really was. Flashbacks blurred across Brent's mind, his father refusing to attend their wedding, the way Imani cried silently in the dressing room, her mascara smudging onto her veil, but her voice never breaking. The way his father had pulled him aside and said, "No son of mine marries a woman who doesn't know her place." Brent had ignored it at first, but over time the poison seeped in. He'd started resenting Imani for her independence, for her voice, for her refusal to be small. And when she gave birth, he'd demanded full custody, not because he feared for the child's well-being, but because he feared the child would love her more. That realization now made him nauseous. At dawn, Brent left the suite without telling his attorneys. He left no voicemail for Imani, no final argument for the court. He disappeared from the case entirely, slipping past reporters in a black cap and hoodie, boarding a one-way flight to Zurich under a private alien. But not before leaving behind a letter, handwritten, sealed, and left with the concierge to deliver to Imani's estate. It arrived mid-morning, hours before the final custody hearing. Imani opened it in the kitchen, her hands already tired from rocking Zayden back to sleep, after another fitful nap. The handwriting was unmistakably Brent's, sharp, slanted, emotionally repressed. The note read, "Imani, you were the better parent always. I knew that before I filed the first custody suit, but I didn't want to lose again. Not to you, not to my father's ghost. I'm sorry for what I've done to this child, and to you. Walk away if you must. But if you fight, fight for him. Not for me, not against me. For him. She folded the letter slowly, tears building but never falling. Part of her wanted to scream, to ask why now, why after everything, but there was no one to scream at. Brent was gone, but the damage wasn't. The trial would proceed without him. Savannah called to inform her that the judge would now consider Lena's testimony as the most significant factor in the decision, especially with Brent's withdrawal. But we still have a shot, Savannah said. You've raised him. That counts. Imani nodded, but something inside her felt loose, untethered. That night, she went to bed with Zayden nestled against her chest, determined to wake early and prepare for whatever judgment awaited them in court. But when she opened her eyes the next morning, something was wrong. The room was too quiet. Zayden's crib was empty. Her heart slammed against her ribs as she called his name, rushed through the hall, checked every room, every corner. The front door was ajar. Panic clawed up her throat. Zayden, she screamed into the hallway. No answer, no sound. On the foyer table was a single note, 3 words, written in soft pencil. I'm sorry, Lena. Lena had vanished in the middle of the night. With Zayden, no one had seen her leave. No staff, no neighbors, just silence, and a child missing. The moment Imani realized Zayden was gone, her world didn't just crumble. It twisted inward, folding over itself in sharp, breathless fragments that clawed at her lungs and screamed in her bones. The 3-word note from Lena sat like a curse on the foyer table, trembling under the force of a mother's rising terror. Within hours, a statewide Amber Alert was issued. Zayden's face beamed out from phone screens, gas pumps, highway billboards, and digital news tickers. His soft brown eyes, his innocent smile, his tiny curls became an icon of panic. But what should have summoned a storm of sympathy, instead opened the floodgates to venom. The media, ever hungry, turned against Imani in record time. How does a billionaire lose her own child? Read one headline. Another nastier asked, was the maid more of a mother than the mogul? Online commentators dissected her parenting, her silence, her wealth, her race, her motherhood. Imani barely slept. She refused sedatives, refused to cry. She met with private investigators in the estate's war room, maps and digital timelines stretched across monitors, Savannah coordinating legal measures, local police issuing statements. They had no leads. She had help, Imani murmured, staring at Zayden's photo for the 1000th time. Lena couldn't have just vanished. Someone helped her disappear, and so she retraced Lena's life, not as an employer, but as a woman clawing her way toward answer. Lena's employee file offered its first clue. Her birthplace, a small town called Ridgeville, 2 hours north, barely a dot on the map. Imani got in her car and drove herself. Alone. No security. No entourage. No media shield. Just a desperate mother behind the wheel of a luxury SUV that didn't feel like it belonged to her anymore. Ridgeville was rural, slow-moving, surrounded by trees thick enough to swallow time. Imani drove past rusted swing sets, boarded-up diners, hand-painted signs advertising boiled peanuts and Bible study. At the edge of town, a crumbling church stood like a relic of someone else's salvation. New Light Missionary Baptist, faded letters on the sign, its front steps sun-bleached and worn. Imani stepped out of the car, heart pounding. Inside, the church was empty except for a thin woman wiping down pews, her skin the color of dark tea, her back slightly hunched but eyes sharp with memory. I'm looking for someone, Imani said. Her name is Lena James. The woman froze mid-wipe, then slowly set the rag down. She was here, she said after a long pause. Came in yesterday, sat right there in that second row, rocked back and forth, said nothing, just hung. Was she alone? Imani asked, stepping closer. She had a child with her. The woman nodded. Sweet boy, quiet, clung to her like he knew she was leaving again. Did she say where she was going? The woman shook her head, only said she had to go back where it all started. Said it's the only place that ever made sense to her. Imani looked toward the pew the woman had pointed to, and froze. Draped over the seat was a small worn blanket with cartoon elephants, stitched into the corner. It was Zayden's, the one he refused to nap without. Imani picked it up with trembling fingers, pressing it to her face, inhaling the faint scent of lavender and vanilla. His scent. The emotion crashed over her like a tidal wave. She dropped to the pew, clutching the blanket, sobbing, not like a woman of wealth or power, but like a mother who had lost her anchor. In that moment, all the years of quiet strength, all the stoicism she'd learned as a black woman climbing white ladders, collapsed. Her sobs echoed in the sanctuary, bouncing off stained glass like prayers never answered. The cleaning woman didn't interrupt. She simply stepped outside and let the church cradle Imani in its silence. Minutes later, a child's voice broke the quiet. "You look like her." Imani turned. A young girl no more than 9 stood near the door, clutching a children's Bible. Her hair was braided in beads that clicked when she moved. "I'm sorry?" Imani asked, wiping her face. "Miss Lena," the girl said softly, "you look like her. You got the same sad eyes." Imani knelt. "You saw her?" The girl nodded. "She gave me this," she said, holding up a locket with a tiny photo inside. Lena, holding a newborn, said she used to come here when she was a kid, said she used to hide behind the choir stage when her mom and them were fighting. She said she's going back there. "Back where?" Imani asked, urgency rising. The girl whispered. "She said, she's going back where it all started." Before Imani could ask more, the church doors creaked open behind her, and a man's voice echoed through the sanctuary. "Imani Brooks? You need to come with us. We found something." The man who called her from the church steps was part of the private security team Savannah had dispatched to Ridgeville. Once Imani's tracker showed she'd gone rogue, his voice had the clipped tone of urgency laced with unease. And as Imani followed him back to the car, still clutching Zayden's blanket like it held oxygen, he handed her a tablet showing surveillance screenshots. Grainy but clear. Lena, wearing a long coat and sunglasses, exiting a bus station in Atlanta, holding Zayden's hand, the boy looking up at her with unwavering trust. The timestamp read 36 hours earlier. It didn't make sense. Ridgeville was north. Atlanta was west. She doubled back. Imani murmured, voice low, eyes scanning Lena's face as if the image could speak. "She knew I'd follow the obvious trail." "She's smart," the man replied, "and scared." Imani climbed into the back seat of the SUV. The seats too soft, the silence too loud, her mind spinning. Atlanta, Lena's birthplace, a city soaked in the blood and brilliance of Black history. And yet the corner Lena had grown up on, when Imani finally arrived hours later, was a ghost of that legacy. A broken grid of cracked sidewalks, half-boarded homes, empty lots where playgrounds should have been. The neighborhood smelled of heat, old soil, and resignation. Children rode bikes on streets lined with caution tape and crooked mailboxes. Imani stood out here, and she knew it, not just because of her tailored coat or foreign license plate, but because her posture, her presence, screamed escape. She parked near a sunken brick building with peeling paint, the faded letters Ashby Court, still clinging to its awning. Lena's last known address, listed on an old employment form, was apartment 3B. The door was sealed with plywood. On the mailbox, a cracked label read Jane. Inside the corner store across the street, Imani asked the clerk, a round-faced man with skeptical eyes, if he remembered Lena James. He tilted his head, then nodded slowly. Quiet girl, lived with her mama, always wore a scarf on her head, even in the summer. Used to come in here and buy juice boxes. Real polite. She don't come around no more. Her mother, Imani asked. The man's face shifted. Died. Years ago. Some say suicide. Others say, well, he looked around. Her employer got away clean. Cops never looked too hard. Imani's throat tightened. She stepped outside, suddenly needing air. Her phone buzzed. Savannah. Any luck? Just ghosts. Imani said. Lena's not just hiding. She's chasing something. What do you mean? Her trauma isn't just personal. It's generational. Imani hung up and kept walking, guided by instinct now, retracing Lena's pain one sidewalk at a time. A few blocks away stood an old diner called Dottie's, the kind of place where grease never left the walls, and the booth sagged from decades of secret. Imani pushed through the door, ignored the stairs, and slid a photo of Zayden across the counter to the waitress, a silver-haired black woman, who stared at it for all of 3 seconds, before gasping, "Oh Lord, I seen this baby." Imani leaned in. When, 2 days, he came in with a woman, tired eyes, no ring. She ordered 2 pancakes, asked for extra syrup, real polite. The boy looked sleepy. She fed him slow, didn't look like she had anywhere to go. Imani's voice cracked. Did she say where she was headed? The woman nodded, said she was waiting for the 310 Greyhound, asked if it still stopped on Auburn. I told her yes. Imani's pulse quickened. Did she say where she was going? Oklahoma, the woman said. Told me it's where her mama was buried. Said it's where everything started and ended. Imani's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, calling Savannah. Get me the Greyhound terminal. I need access to ticket sales from 2 days ago. Name, Lena James. Destination, Oklahoma. An hour later she had it. 2 tickets purchased under Lena's real name, paid in cash. Departure 3:10 p.m. Confirmed boarding, but it was the next detail that sent ice through Amani's chest. A third person had boarded with them, unregistered, described by the bus driver as a tall black man in a brown coat, escorting the woman and child onto the bus before vanishing at the last second. The driver remembered him, because the child had called him Dada. Amani's breath caught. She showed the photo of Brent to the station attendant. The woman's face went pale. "That's him," she said. "That's the man who walked them to the bus. He didn't get on though, just waited till they pulled off. Watched the whole time." Amani staggered back, the station spinning around her. But Brent had disappeared, left a letter, claimed regret. "He lied," she whispered. "He never left. He's still pulling string." Her phone vibrated again. An unknown number. She answered. On the other end, a voice whispered, "You need to find her fast. She's not safe where she's going. They're watching her." The voice on the phone had been distorted, low, frightened, warning Imani that Lena was headed somewhere dangerous. Somewhere watched. And as the call cut out abruptly, she was already moving, already calling Savannah to pull records, flight manifests, old property deeds, anything that could explain what Brent had meant when he said he knew where Lena would go. It wasn't until Imani traced Brent's old development files that a lead appeared. An abandoned lot in Tulsa, Oklahoma, once owned by Holloway Holdings, a failed investment he'd written off after a zoning scandal. The same town where Lena's mother had grown up, where she'd worked as a housemaid for a prominent white family, and died mysteriously days after reporting her employer for abuse. Imani booked the flight herself, landed with no security, rented a car and drove 3 hours through wide stretches of dust, silence and memory. At the edge of a rural road lined with overgrown grass and rusted mailboxes, she found the house weather-worn, sagging on one side, its windows dark and empty, but a flicker of movement near the trees behind it made her heart lurch. She followed instinct, not logic, and entered the tree line. Minutes passed like hours until she heard it. A familiar voice, low, male. "Brent, we'll only be here a few days," he was saying. "Then we'll figure it out." "Figure what out?" came Lena's voice. Strained, tired. "This isn't a life, this is running." Imani pushed past a thick patch of brush and emerged into a clearing. There they were, Lena crouched near a makeshift fire pit, Zayden asleep in a small tent behind her, and Brent standing tall, rigid, as if expecting the storm that just arrived in the shape of the woman he thought he'd left behind. "You lied to me," Imani said, her voice cracking not with rage but betrayal. Brent didn't move. "I had to. You said you were gone. You said you left for good." "I thought I could," Brent replied, eyes hollow. "But after I disappeared, I realized I had nothing left but him." Imani's gaze darted to Zayden's form, still peaceful, unaware of the civil war unraveling around him. "So you tracked her down." "She called me," Brent said. "When the pressure got too much, I didn't know where else to go either." "So this is it?" Imani said, stepping forward. "The two of you." "What? Forming some broken little family out of grief?" Lena stood slowly, her face lined with sorrow. "We didn't plan this, we just found each other in the wreckage." Imani's voice trembled. "You think that makes you his parents? Because you're hurting?" She looked at Brent, then at Lena. "You don't get to claim him just because you're in pain." "Then what are we supposed to do?" Lena whispered, her hands shaking as she dropped her bag to the ground. "I carried him, I felt him, and then I lost him. And I watched the world give him to someone who never even knew he existed." "I knew him," Imani snapped. "Every fever, every nightmare, every birthday. I held him when he was sick. I held him when he took his first step. I held him when he called someone mama for the first time. And it was me." Brent looked between them, silent, broken. "So what now?" he said, voice low. "We destroy each other in front of him." "No," Imani said, tears finally falling. "But we stop pretending pain makes us better parents. Zayden doesn't need 3 ghosts arguing over who hurts the most. He needs a future." For a moment, no one spoke. The fire crackled, low and tired. Lena knelt down and opened the flap of the tent, looking at Zayden. "He's so small," she whispered. "Too small to carry all this." Imani's shoulders slumped. "He shouldn't have to." Then suddenly, thunder cracked above them. A strong gust of wind swept through the trees, bending branches, stirring. A storm was breaking overhead, sharp, fast, and wild. Brent looked up. "We need to get inside," he said. But in the chaos, none of them noticed that Zayden was no longer in the tent. Lena turned first, panic rising. "Zayden?" she called, peering inside, her voice sharp with terror. Zayden? Imani's stomach dropped. He was just here. Brent spun around. I saw him 5 minutes ago. I swear? Zayden? Lena screamed. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier. The sky roared, and in the woods, no reply came back. The clearing erupted into chaos as the storm hit full force. And somewhere in the woods, Zayden was alone. Rain slashed sideways across the clearing as lightning fractured the sky in violent pulses of white. And before anyone could process it fully, all 3 adults had broken into a frantic run. Branches snapping underfoot, leaves whipping against their faces as they plunged into the forest shouting Zayden's name over and over, their voices frantic and unraveling. Zayden, Lena screamed, her voice cracking with every syllable, her arms flailing through the dark as her feet sank into mud and pine. Baby, where are you? Brent limped behind them at first, then surged forward, only to slip in the underbrush, landing hard on his side. He grunted, tried to rise, but pain shot up his leg like fire. My knee, damn it, he cursed, collapsing back into the grass. Imani didn't stop. She pushed deeper into the storm-drenched woods, branches slashing her skin, vision blurred with rain and fear, calling Zayden's name with a tremor that rattled her chest. Her mind spiraled into fragments of memory. Zayden giggling in the bathtub, arms outstretched toward her as he learned to walk, whispering, Mama, half asleep, while she hummed lullabies. And behind those memories, another layer pushed forward, her own mother's face, worn and tired, holding her in the dark as sirens passed their window whispering, I can't protect you from all of it, baby, but I'll die trying. That same vow surged through Imani's veins. Now as she screamed again, Zayden, the forest answered only with thunder. Somewhere behind her, Lena fell to her knees in the mud, sobbing incoherently, pounding the ground with her fists. I shouldn't have brought him here, she cried. Why did I do this? Why did I think I deserved to? Get up, Brent yelled from a distance, trying to crawl toward her. Get up, Lena. He's out there. Imani kept going, past a broken log, deeper into a gully where the trees thinned slightly, water rushing through a ditch to the river below. That's when she saw it, a small blue sneaker, half submerged in the mud, near the edge of the bank. Her heart stopped. She dropped to her knees, yanked the shoe free. It was Zayden's. Oh God, she whispered, then screamed louder than she ever had. Zayden, and in the distance, faint and broken through the wind, a call. She turned violently toward the sound, scrambled across the slick ground, her hands slipping, legs burning, lungs on fire. Then she saw him, just beyond a clump of low-hanging trees, clinging to the trunk of a waterlogged sapling near the riverbank, shivering, his face pale and slack. Zayden, she shrieked, crashing through the branches. She reached him, cradled his limp body into her chest, shook him gently. Baby, I'm here, wake up, baby, please. His eyes fluttered, then closed. His lips were tinged with blue. Panic screamed through her veins. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck, faint pulse. Hold on, she whispered, gripping him tighter. You're not leaving me, you hear me? You're not leaving. Behind her, Brent's voice echoed faintly. Did you find him? Imani. She didn't respond. She was already running, barefoot, soaked, mud smeared across her arms. Zayden's body wrapped against her like a second skin. She reached the clearing as Lena stumbled toward her, eyes wide, mouth trembling. Is he? Call an ambulance. Imani screamed. Now, Brent fumbled for his phone, hands slick with rain, fingers shaking. As the emergency dispatcher crackled on the line, Imani knelt beside Lena, who had collapsed again, sobbing into her hand. He's not breathing right, Imani whispered, holding Zayden's head in her lap, rocking him back and forth. He's not. The ambulance arrived, 16 minutes later. Eternity stretched into minutes, as paramedics performed CPR, inserted a breathing tube, loaded his tiny body into the Imani rode with him, one hand gripping his while the other pressed the soaked elephant print blanket to his chest, refusing to let it go. Lena and Brent followed in silence, both of them broken in different ways. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights were too bright, the floors too clean, the air too cold. Doctors moved like ghosts in scrubs, issuing commands, checking monitors, whispering numbers. Imani stood frozen just outside the trauma bay, watching through the window as they placed oxygen tubes, chest monitors, IVs. Savannah arrived 20 minutes later, breathless, eyes wild. What happened? He got lost, Imani whispered. He almost drowned. Is he? They don't know, Imani said, voice flat. They said his oxygen was cut off too long. They said he may not wake up. Inside the trauma room, a nurse suddenly gasped, his heart rates dropping, as alarms erupted and Imani's world tilted again. The beeping of machines became a second heartbeat in the hospital room, a cold mechanical rhythm that replaced the softness of Zayden's laughter, the chaos of toddler feet on hardwood floors, the warmth of a child's arms wrapped around a mother's neck. Now there was only stillness and tubes. Days passed, and he didn't wake. Imani sat in the corner chair with her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes fixed on Zayden's face, pale, unmoving, his tiny frame lost beneath the weight of wires and blankets. Lena sat across from her, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white, her nails digging into her palms like she was trying to hold something broken together by sheer will. Brent, unusually quiet, paced the far side of the room with the restless guilt of a man running from a truth he could no longer outsprint. Outside the hospital, the headlines had faded. The same cameras that once hunted Imani across parking lots now turned their attention to new tragedies, new scandals. The world had moved on, but Imani hadn't. "I feel like I failed him," she whispered one morning, breaking a silence that had lasted hours. Her voice cracked. "I kept him safe from the world, but not from the people closest to him, not even from me." "You didn't fail him," Lena said, her voice hoarse. "You saved him. I didn't get there in time, but you got there," Lena replied. "He heard your voice before he passed out. I saw the way he reached for you. You were still his home." Imani wiped a tear with the back of her hand. "What if he never wakes up? Then we keep sitting here," Lena said, "and we keep loving him." A therapist entered the room later that afternoon. Young, black female, with the kind of softness in her presence that didn't demand attention, but earned it. She introduced herself as Dr. Cameron Ellis, and spoke gently. "There's evidence that even in comas, patients can hear familiar voice, especially children. So talk to him. Don't wait for him to respond. Just speak." She left them with that instruction, and a notebook filled with grief exercises. No one touched. The room was quiet again. Then Lena stood. She walked slowly to Zayden's bedside, brushing back a loose curl from his forehead. "Hi, baby," she whispered. "It's Mama Lena. I know you're tired. I know you've been through too much for someone your size. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for dragging you through my pain. I thought, if I could just hold you, if I could just be near you, I'd heal. But love doesn't work that way, does it? You taught me that." She kissed his forehead, tears falling freely. "You are loved, no matter whose blood you carry." Then she stepped back and nodded at Brent. He hesitated, then approached the bed awkwardly, unsure of where to place his hands. "Zayden," he said softly, "I never really knew what being a father meant. I was raised by a man who only taught me how to win, and I thought winning meant possession, owning people, silencing. But you undid that. I saw you sleeping once, and I realized I was more scared of your innocence than your anger. I knew I didn't deserve you. I still don't. But I want to be better, not for a court, not for power, just for you." He stepped away, letting the moment settle into the still air. Imani stood last. She took Zayden's small hand in hers, and knelt beside the bed, resting her head gently next to it. "You made me a mother," she said, "even when I didn't think I could be one, even when I wasn't ready. You gave me purpose, and now if you need to rest longer, I'll wait. I'll be right here. I'll read you your favorite book. I'll hum your lullaby. And I'll wait. Just don't leave me. Please don't leave me." Her voice cracked again. "I can't survive it." The room was quiet again. Only the machines kept speaking. Then, as if touched by something unseen, Zayden's fingers twitched. Imani froze. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Lena stood slowly. Brent stepped forward, and again his hand moved, this time curling ever so slightly. Then silence, and one soft exhale. The twitch of Zayden's fingers was so slight, so delicate, that for a moment it felt like the universe was playing with their hopes. But then it happened again, a full movement, and a sound followed. A shallow gasp, sharp and sudden, like a soul returning from the edge of something unspeakable. Imani's heart exploded in her chest. "Zayden?" she breathed, leaning closer, her hands trembling as they hovered above his body. "Baby, it's Mama. I'm here." Lena moved slowly toward the bed, eyes wide with disbelief, and Brent stood frozen, his mouth parted as if trying to catch a prayer that had escaped before it could form. Zayden's eyelids fluttered, fighting against the weight of sleep and silence, and then he opened his eyes. Two brown orbs, glassy and confused, blinked into the fluorescent light. "Mama," he murmured, voice scratchy and hoarse. Imani collapsed forward, sobbing uncontrollably, her face buried in his sheets, gripping his little hand like she'd never let go. Lena wept silently behind her, hands covering her mouth, whispering, "Thank you, thank you." Brent exhaled deeply and leaned against the wall, letting his head fall back as the tears finally broke free, not for winning or losing, but for surviving something none of them had the words to describe. Over the next few days, Zayden improved steadily. His speech returned in slow bursts. His appetite gradually came back, and though his energy remained low, his spirit flickered back with small smiles, tiny hands reaching for crayons, and quiet requests for bedtime stories. But with his recovery came a new tension. Who would take him home? The question lingered like a ghost in the hospital room, never spoken outright but pressed between every silence, every glance. The legal hearing, postponed after the incident, was quickly rescheduled. On the morning of the final ruling, the courtroom was more subdued than before. No cameras, no protest signs, just worn faces, tired hearts, and a judge who looked heavier than he had weeks ago. Judge Henley adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. This case at its surface is about custody, but after everything I've read, seen and witnessed, this isn't about law anymore. It's about something deeper, something that isn't printed in a statute. He paused. This court sees three people who have all in their own way failed, and yet all have loved, loved deeply, loved imperfectly, but loved. Imani sat straight but still. Lena gripped her knees. Brent sat like stone. The child in question, Zayden James Brooks Holloway, deserves stability. But more than that, he deserves dignity. And that includes the right to grow up with all the truths, not just the legal ones. He looked at Imani. Ms. Brooks, you raised him. You fought for him. You showed the courage and humility most don't. Then to Lena. James, you endured unthinkable erasure, and reclaimed your voice, not for revenge, but for love. Then to Brent, and Mr. Holloway, your role in this has been complicated, sometimes self-serving, but you stayed, and that counts for something. He leaned forward. This court won't impose a full custody ruling. Instead, I offer a mediated, flexible co-parenting agreement, structured visits, shared holidays, emotional boundaries, but I leave the final decision to you three. Not because I'm avoiding it, but because for once, I trust the people more than the system. Silence fell. The courtroom had never felt more sacred. Brent stood first. He walked slowly to the front of the courtroom, eyes locked on the floor. Your Honor, I decline. The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Holloway. Brent turned to Imani, then Lena. I'm leaving the country, not to run, but because I finally realized something. I was fighting for a version of fatherhood that didn't exist, one shaped by legacy, not love. I thought power made me a parent, but it doesn't. Responsibility does, and I haven't earned that. I step aside. I'll transfer all financial support, but I won't fight anymore. Imani didn't move. Lena's eyes brimmed again. Then it was her turn. Lena stood slowly, voice. Imani, I can't imagine the courage it took to raise a child you thought was yours, only to learn you were sharing him with ghosts. But you did it, with love, with grace, and he's safe because of you. She walked over to Imani, trembling. I'll take visits. I'll be whatever you let me be. But he's yours. You raised him. He knows your heartbeat. He chose you before we knew there was a choice. Imani stood, barely able to breathe. You're both a part of him, she whispered. You always will be. The gavel didn't strike. There was no final order. Just three people in a courtroom, learning how to make peace from pieces. Days later, Zayden was discharged. The hospital staff lined the hallway, clapping gently as he left in Imani's arms. A paper crown on his head, a lollipop in his hand, and a stuffed elephant tucked under his arm. The sun outside was soft and golden. As the car pulled into the long drive leading to Imani's estate, Zayden yawned in the back seat. Home, he whispered, half asleep. Yes, baby, Imani said, eyes glistening. Home. But as they approached the gate, Imani's joy faltered. Standing on the other side of the wrought iron fence was a woman in a crisp white blouse and oversized sunglasses. Cynthia Hargrove, the woman from the pool, the one who started it all. Cynthia raised her hand slowly, not in accusation this time, but in apology, and in the other hand, she held a legal envelope. Cynthia Hargrove stood at the wrought iron gate, like a remnant from another life, her sunglasses shielding what shame hadn't yet melted, her manicured fingers gripping a weathered envelope. She seemed unsure she had the right to carry. Imani stepped out of the car slowly, Zayden still resting in the back seat, unaware of the weight pressing down around them. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Then Cynthia cleared her throat, removed her glasses, and revealed eyes reddened, not by wind, but by consequence. I'm not here to fight, she said softly. I'm not here to insult or explain. I'm here because I was wrong. Imani's jaw tensed. She said nothing. After that day at the pool, Cynthia continued. I lost everything. My husband left. My firm dropped me. They said I was bad for branding. She laughed bitterly. A few seconds of footage, and I was done. You weren't cancelled, Imani said coldly. You were revealed. Cynthia swallowed hard. Yes, and the worst part is, it wasn't new. I've been that woman all my life. Assumptions, entitlement, fear dressed up as standards. I didn't know it was racism until it happened in front of cameras, and now I can't unsee it. She held out the envelope. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need direction. I need to learn. I need to work. I was wondering if there's anything at all I could do. At the resort, Imani stared at her. A silence stretched and simmered. The old version of herself would have sent Cynthia away without a word, but the woman she'd become, the mother, the survivor, the builder, understood that justice sometimes wasn't loud. It was layered, slow, and full circle. There's one position available, Imani said evenly. Entry level, maintenance services. Cynthia blinked. You mean, housekeeping? Yes, Imani replied. Cleaning floors, bathrooms, guest rooms, early mornings, late nights, no exemptions. You take it, or you walk away. Cynthia nodded, almost eagerly. I'll take it. I need to start over. No, you need to start low, Imani corrected. She buzzed the gate open and walked past without another word. Cynthia followed behind, slowly, absorbing the weight of the space she once tried to police. The irony was not lost on anyone. Days later, dressed in a gray uniform with no name tag, Cynthia knelt in the lobby of Solstice Grand Resort, with a bucket and sponge, scrubbing the same marble tiles she once paraded across in heels and passive arrogance. Guests walked past her with the same cold indifference she once wore so easily, but Imani watched from the executive balcony above, not with cruelty, but clarity. She remembered her own first day at 17, mopping floors for a boutique hotel, where no one remembered her name, only her skin. She remembered the manager who told her to smile more, the guest who slipped her a tip as if she were invisible, the ache of invisibility. And now, the view was different. Below her, the pool sparkled under morning light, not just as a luxury feature, but a battleground where a chapter had ended and another began. It was here where she was profiled, here where she was humiliated, here where she rose. As she turned away from the railing, Lena appeared at the doorway of her office, holding a small parcel wrapped in a faded cloth. He's sleeping, Lena asked gently. Imani nodded. Finally, he asked for the elephant blanket, the original one, not the backup. Good, Lena smiled. That's a good sign. She handed the parcel over. I made this. Imani opened it slowly. Inside was a hand-stitched quilt, patchworked with fabric scraps, a piece from Zayden's old baby clothes, a swatch of Lena's headscarf, even a square of Imani's old resort uniform. At the center was an embroidered message. For the boy who changed us all. Imani's throat tightened. You didn't have to do this. I did, Lena replied, because we all lost something, but we also built something. He gave us. Imani reached forward and embraced her. No walls, no titles, just two mothers who had fought and wept and bled for the same child. As Lena walked away, Imani stepped into her son's room, sunlight spilling across his cheeks, his fingers wrapped around the elephant blanket, eyes fluttering in sleep. She sat beside him and whispered, "You're home now. No one's taking that away again." Outside, the resort buzzed with renewed life. Guests checked in, staff moved with rhythm and pride, and on every welcome packet, beneath the logo, read a new line, founded and owned by Imani Brooks, a name you won't forget. The whispers from that pool incident had evolved. Now guests spoke her name, with reverence. Some booked stays because of her story. Others wrote thank you notes for the inspiration. She hadn't just survived racism, she'd turned it into real estate, into power, into generational equity. And still, the work continued. The legacy had to be fed. That evening, as Imani stood at her balcony once more, Zayden now safe in bed, she stared out at the pool, the very place Cynthia had tried to erase her. Now a plaque near the pool entrance bore her name, and Cynthia herself in uniform, cleaned nearby, quiet and steady. The irony, poetic, the justice, not loud, but absolute. Imani breathed deeply. Her life was far from neat, far from healed, but it was hers, entirely. That night, as she prepared to rest, Renee entered the room with a curious look. "This came for you," she said, handing over a thick envelope. No return address. Imani opened it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a sealed document. The paper read, "Ms. Brooks, You need to see this. Another switch, different hospital, same year. You weren't the only one. Imani's hand trembled. She looked up slowly, heart pounding, as the question rose again. What if there's another Zayden out there? No mother should have to prove she belongs to her own child. No woman should be questioned at the gates of what she built. If this story made you feel something,